Jesus so immediately did something about it. He didn't look for the cause of this. He looked for a cure. And he looked so the opportunity could be, God's mighty powers could be displayed in him. 4 and 5 are not that critical. 6, though, when he had said this, he spat on the ground and made clay of the spittle and applied the clay to his eyes. Sounds nauseating, doesn't it? That's gross, isn't it? He spat on the ground, mixed clay with it, or dirt with it, made mud, and applied it to the man's eyes. It's not so far out, though, because in that day and time, spittle was considered to have some sort of medicinal purposes and value. And you'd have, in a sense, that same sort of opinion today. You cut your finger, and what do? That hurt. That's something. Lots of times that happens. And in ball-playing situations, you know, you get a strawberry on your elbow or something, they say, I'll spit on it and rub a little dirt and it'll be okay. You know, tough it out, it'll help. But in those days and times, it was deemed a healing virtue. To put a little, with that opinion, I think Christ probably did this as a crutch for the man. Now here's a guy that's been blind from birth. If he had any spirituality in him at all, surely he's at times said, Lord, heal my blindness. And nothing has happened. And as a result, surely his faith is suffering. And as a crutch to his faith, Jesus applies this sort of purpose to him. It gives him a little boost. You know, he said, hey, you know, maybe there is something to this. And as a result, he mixes clay, verse 6. He spits in the ground, applies the clay to his eyes, and so go wash in the pool of Siloam. Siloam, which is translated sin. And he went away and washed and came back seeing. The object of helping his faith, and then the fact that there was a certain belief that spittle could have some medicinal purposes to it, helped God make manifest his work at this point in time. Now there's another kicker to all of this, though. Sabbath day. Remember last week we said medicine was not practiced on the Sabbath? If you had a bandage on your head and it was designed to keep the wound from getting worse, it was okay. But if it was designed to keep it or help it get better, it was a no-no. Spitting and making the salve to apply to his eyes was against the oral tradition of the day. As a result, now we've got this confrontation coming down again. In a sense, though, who cured the man? What cured the man? Was it the spit? The dirt? The washing? The faith? No, it was Jesus. That God's mighty works might be made manifest in this man. And it was. In a sense, the man moved from darkness to light. All of his life, he's been in the dark. Now his eyes are open. He's in the light. I know that meant something to him. But it's a problem to those people that are still in the darkness. You let somebody from among us be blessed in some way, and those of us who do not get equal blessings have difficulty with it. The man went from darkness to light, but all those that he left in the darkness, and not just physically dark, but spiritually dark also, had difficulty with it. And from this point forward, we pick up a comic opera. From this point forward, in this chapter, we really pick up a comic opera. Let's look in verse 8. He went away, washed, and he came back seeing. The neighbors, therefore, his friends and confidants, and those who previously saw him as a beggar were saying, isn't this the guy who used to sit around here and beg all the time? And others were saying, this is he. And others were saying, no, no, he's like him. But all the time he kept saying in verse 9, I'm the one. They would say, well, you're not the same guy that used to... No, no, you look a lot like him. He said, it's me. It's me. And they were problemed by it. In verse 10, therefore they were saying to them, how'd you get your eyes opened? And he said, the man who is called Jesus, it wasn't the clay, it wasn't the spit, it wasn't the washing, it was Jesus. The man who called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes and said to me, go to Siloam and wash. And I went and washed and I received my sight. And they said, well, where is he now? And a sad commentary was he had to answer, I don't know. Because Jesus sent him away to wash. And he hadn't been able to find him back. Friends and neighbors, as they were, in verse 13, brought then the Pharisees to him, or brought him who was formerly blind to the Pharisees, because it was on the Sabbath, that the day that Jesus had made the clay and opened his eyes. Now the comic opera continues. In verse 15, the Pharisees say to him who had received his sight, as he said to them, he applied clay to my eyes, and I washed, and now I see. Therefore some of the Pharisees were saying, this is not from God, because he doesn't keep the Sabbath. God's not in this at all, because this is the Sabbath, and if he were, he wouldn't honor this sort of work on his day. But others were saying, how can a sinner perform such signs? And there was division among them. Rightfully so. You see the camp starting to be divided. One of them saying, this got to be apart from God, because nobody could work on the Sabbath and honor God. And others say, yeah, but if he's a sinner, how does he do this unless God's in him somehow? So they got problems with both of those. 17, they cast then this division back to the blind man. What do you say about him since he opened your eyes? You're the first-hand experiencer of all of this. Who do you say the man is? And he said, well, he's a prophet. Seemed like a safe enough answer. You watch this blind man's faith grow as he starts and experiences one little success after another. He starts at a point in the continuum and says, he's a prophet. Well, the Jews therefore did not believe it of him, because he had been blind and had received sight, until they finally decided to call the parents of the very one who received his sight. I don't like your answer, boy. You're not helping me at all. Therefore, I want to talk with your parents. Bring them in. So they brought them in. And in verse 19, they questioned them, saying, is this your son, who you say was born blind, that does now see? The parents copped out. They answered them and said, well, wait. We know that this is our son, and we know that he was born blind. But how he now sees, we do not know, or who opened his eyes, we do not know. Ask him. He's of age. He'll speak for himself. You see the comic opera developing? They're just grabbing at straws. They call the parents in and they say, now look, this is who you say your son is, who you said once was blind. What's the story behind this? They said, well, we know he's our son. We know he was blind. We don't know how he now sees. We don't know who helped heal him. You might as well ask him, though. He's of age. Ask him. Then it gives you a reason for this. Verse 22. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone would confess him to be the Christ, he would be put out of the synagogue. Is that a big deal? It was. Very big deal. It was a big deal because it was not only the focus of worship, but it was the focus of one's livelihood. If you got put out of the synagogue, you had no spiritual relationships with anybody. Not only did you have no spiritual relationships, they didn't do business with you. You're a merchant? Not only, well, say you're not a merchant, they wouldn't employ you. You didn't get a job. You were literally ostracized. Now that made for a lot of strong cooperation. With that sort of club over somebody's head, you could dictate a number of things to them. I got to reflecting back when I started reading that, and I can't think of the exact example, and I'm sure some of you can, though. Who was